Well, for those of you who saw my Ultima VII videos, it's no secret that I adore that entry the most out of all the Ultima games. The life simulation aspects, the exploration, dialogue, world building. To this day, there really hasn't been a game that could scratch that kind of itch. And considering that Ultima VII set such a high bar, it's a shame that Ultima VIII Pagan couldn't reach its heights. While most Ultima fans consider Ultima VII to be the pinnacle, Ultima VIII is despised by most fans of the series since the release of Ultima II. The biggest reason for that is that Ultima VIII was released pretty much in an unfinished state. A lot of plot was cut out, many areas incomplete, an expansion pack that was finished but never released due to poor sales, as well as many technical issues. I realize a lot of this stuff is already mentioned, and I imagine that a lot of Ultima fans have already watched through many Ultima videos already, but regardless, the biggest disappointment to longtime fans was just how much more backwards Ultima VIII is compared to Ultima VII. You can't choose your gender or portrait anymore. Instead, you play as the blonde-haired, blue-eyed male avatar. There are no companions, no portraits, no experience point system, no training system. Instead, stats are raised just by swinging your weapon and reading books and casting spells. No transportation to interact with, such as carriages, boats, magic carpets, and the like, and no ranged weapons, such as bows and crossbows. But the biggest thing is that the world interaction from Ultima VII, all that cool stuff like baking bread, cutting cloth into bandages, animations for sitting in chairs and sleeping in beds, they're all pretty much gone. You can fish, but you no longer need to eat food in this game to survive. Instead, it just heals the avatar a bit. And I think I read somewhere that it also increases his health regeneration, but other than that, you can completely ignore food in Ultima VIII, which is a first for the series. Another thing is that the world is much smaller than the Black Gate and even Serpent Isle, and is much more linear than the former. The game is also a lot shorter than both parts of Ultima VII, at least with a guide. A lot of the gameplay is spent in dungeons and catacombs instead of visiting various villages and landmarks, and most of these areas are visually indistinct from each other. Ultima VIII was also the first mainline Ultima game to introduce jumping, and at release, this was apparently a very buggy experience, which really soured a lot of longtime Ultima fans. Pagan was jokingly called the Super Avatar Brothers back then due to the introduction of platforming. So, what the hell happened exactly? Well, the game was released under a very strict deadline by EA. Serpent Isle released in March of 1993, with Pagan releasing almost exactly a year later on the same month. If they worked on Pagan right after finishing Serpent Isle, well, that's definitely not enough time to release a finished product. And this is with a new engine, new graphics and sprites, animations, equipment writing, and so on and so forth. It's also a good time to mention that the engine used in Ultima VIII was later used for the Crusader games, which I talked about on this channel. In fact, one of the programmers for Ultima VIII, Tony Zurovec, directed both games, and they're pretty damn awesome, so there you go. But when you combine all this and compare it to Ultima VII, or hell, even early Ultima games, it's no wonder why Ultima fans had a bad experience with Pagan. And I have to admit something here, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I love this game. That's right, I said it. And I'll explain myself, but if you're hoping I tear this game apart piece by piece, well, you're just going to be disappointed. Instead, I'm going to explain why I, and a few others I've seen over the years, love this game despite its glaring flaws. Honestly, to this day, I've really only seen one positive video on Ultima VIII Pagan, and it was this video I saw years ago by the original uploader that got me interested in doing game videos. So I'll say that if this video resonates with you, or if you're just looking for more perspective, then I'll put a link to his video in the description. He breaks things down pretty well. Just know that that channel's uploader isn't the guy in the video. David moved away from doing gaming content a long time ago, I believe. In fact, I believe most of you have already seen the video according to my analytics in the YouTube studio. So just bear with me if I have to repeat some of his points, as a lot of my thoughts coincide with his. And I'll finish this bit by saying that I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to say that Pagan is misunderstood and that everyone who hates it is wrong, or that I'm right and you're just missing the point or something like that. Instead, this video is just me saying why I, and a few others I've seen over the years, like this game despite its glaring flaws, as I said. So once again, get ready for spoilers like my Ultima VII videos. After the Avatar restored balance to the Serpent Isle, the known universe, the Guardian takes the opportunity to snatch him from the ethereal void and banish him to a world called Pagan, a world that the Guardian himself has conquered many years ago, and are currently being ruled over by 4 evil gods known as the Titans. The first thing I can mention, and is honestly one of the reasons why I love the game so much, is just how dark and atmospheric Pagan is. Ultima had some dark moments over the years, but Pagan dials it up quite a bit. Right after speaking with Devin at the docks, the Avatar witnesses the execution of an innocent man named Torn, whose only crime is speaking his mind against the current ruler. A woman named Lady Mordia who oversees the city of Tenebrae with an iron fist, or rather, lightning. Unlike Britannia, no one in Pagan follows or even knows of the virtues, and here, being a virtuous man is likely to get you killed, much like poor Torn here. Despite the unfinished nature of Pagan, the atmosphere is one of its strongest points. It has this melancholic, foreboding feel to it. I know many people don't really like or care for it, especially coming from previous Ultima games. I felt the developers did an excellent job with this dark, almost serene world. And it's probably no secret that I love horror-themed games judging by my profile pictures, and I attribute Ultima VIII as the reason why I like games like Diablo 1, and several survival horror games such as Silent Hill and Amnesia the Dark Descent, to name a few. But the attraction I have for Pagan's dark atmosphere is that I see it as a challenge, a struggle, an obstacle to overcome and survive through. And in Pagan, the Avatar is all alone in this foreign world, with no companions to help him out, and is utterly ignorant on the culture and world he finds himself in. While a lot of people didn't like the absence of companions, I find that the solitude this game offers is one of the best things about it. It leaves you feeling alone and isolated in an unknown environment you have to struggle through. There's no help to be found anywhere, and your allies are few and far in between. And as much as I love the Avatar's companions, having to juggle through their inventories can be a bit of a drag sometimes. I mentioned earlier that Pagan's world is a lot smaller than previous games. There's really only one town in the game, the city of Tenebrae, ruled by the evil Tempest Mordea. There's a few other areas with NPCs walking around you can talk to, but they can hardly be considered towns as they're more like enclaves dedicated to the respective schools of magic. The city of Tenebrae is divided into 3 sections, with the central section housing the palace, the rich folk on the east side, and the poor sods on the west side. And aside from talking to NPCs and maybe raiding houses for loot, there isn't a whole lot going on here, unfortunately. You'll find guardsmen harassing the peasants every once in a while, which really hammers home into how bad this place is compared to even the Serpent Isle. But at least here they're not going to toss you in the dungeons for saying you serve Lord British, though they probably just execute you for being insane or something. But one thing you have to be careful about is hitting NPCs or stealing in plain view. Otherwise, the town sorcerer, Baron, will teleport in, and this will happen. Blasted to kingdom come, and when you die in Pagan, you die. There's no resurrection or waking up in a safe area like in Ultima VII. I know you can always reload a save, but the ramifications for dying in Pagan is pretty harsh, and that's one thing I'll get to later on. The main story of the game has the Avatar seeking a way to leave Pagan. At the advice of Devin, the fisherman the Avatar met at the docks, he has to talk to librarian Bentic, who tells him to visit an old mage named Mithran on the plateau. From here, Mithran basically tells the Avatar that he must master the 4 elemental schools of magic, and recommends he speak with the Necromancers. But before I get into that, I should bring up the Titans. Basically, there are 4. Well, 5, and each one corresponds with their respective elements. The first is Lithos, Titan of Earth, also known as the Mountain King, and he oversees the school of Necromancy, which makes sense. Then there's Hydros, Titan of Water. This one isn't a school of magic, as this one is hereditary. Remember the Lady Mordea I mentioned earlier? She's a Tempest of Hydros, and she can basically kill anyone at will with bolts of lightning. Best not to make her mad, or even better, just don't talk to her at all. And then there's Stratos, Titan of Air. She represents the school of Theurgy, which is basically healing magic. She's also, at least on the surface, a little more benevolent than the other Titans, or so she would have you think, probably. And finally, there's Pyros, Titan of Fire, Demon King, and Lord of Flames. Yeah, he gets more titles than the others for some reason. He represents the school of Sorcery and is one of my favorite schools of magic in Pagan. There's also a fifth element. I'll leave this one for later too. Before the Guardian took over Pagan, however, it used to be ruled by a race of people called the Zealans, who worshipped 6 gods who represented various emotions. Those gods are Amorous, Odeon, and Apathis, who symbolize love, anger, and neutrality, as well as Doloras, Felicitar, and Timira, who represented grief, joy, and fear. And then the Guardian came in and ruined everything like he always does. He basically tricked the Zealans by using the voice like he did with Fellowship members back in the Black Gate, warning them that a destroyer is going to arrive to destroy the world. The Zealans ended up splitting apart and eventually warred with each other, with the Pagans creating a temple and building a Blackrock obelisk, much like the one the Avatar destroyed in the Black Gate. They ended up creating 4 elemental gods known as the Titans to help in their battle with the destroyer. Well, unbeknownst to the Pagans, the destroyer ended up being the Guardian, and when he arrived, he and the Titans destroyed much of the world, leaving the Zealans fractured and forgotten, and most of Pagan engulfed in water from Hydros' flooding. What remains is a small island known as Mount Morgalen, which also happens to be an active volcano, with the land stuck in a state of perpetual twilight due to the sun being hidden by thick clouds. Yeah, not a place I would want to live. But how depressing. The idea of the Pagans creating their own hell and destroying their own planet is pretty sad, especially since all of them are so ignorant about it. Imagine being responsible for the state of the world and you're just not aware of it. I mean, it's not their fault, they were deceived by the Guardian. But anyways, once the Destroyer, aka the Guardian, arrived, he destroyed the temple the Pagans erected and split apart the Blackrock obelisk into 5 fragments. Going back to the Necromancers though, they're pretty much your first experience with learning spells in Pagan, and it's here where the Avatar starts getting his hands dirty. Before Vividos can even teach the Avatar spells though, he has to send his master Lothian to Lithos, the Mountain King, but he can't do that because Lady Mordea stole the ceremonial dagger from him, which is causing Lithos to get angry and cause earthquakes all across Pagan. The Avatar agrees to help out, of course. I mean, we kinda have no choice here because we have to learn Necromancy in order to get off Pagan, but this does mean we have to commit a bit of thievery. You have to get a key from one of Mordea's servants while she's off work and be very careful not to step on Mordea's carpet, otherwise she wakes up and kills you. You can come here while she's eating instead, come to think of it. I'm not sure if this works while she's in the throne room, but bringing the dagger back to Vividos reveals, well, it's best I just show you. This is the Avatar's life now. Looks barbarous, but this is how things work on Pagan. You see, many years ago, after the Titans took down the Destroyer, they ended up terrorizing the people of Pagan. Lithos himself was quelled by a man named Kalen, who forged a pact with Lithos. Lithos agreed that he would stop the earthquakes if the dead would serve him for all eternity, whether they died from old age or not. Now, remember what happened to Torn in the beginning? Since he was executed, his soul did not go to Lithos. It went to the Lurker, aka Hydros, the Water Titan. So either way, if you die to the Lurker, you become one of these things that sometimes poke their head above water. Otherwise, you're an undead creature for Lithos. Forever. See the ramifications of the Avatar dying on Pagan now? After the ritualistic murder though, you learn 2 spells, one of which grants you access to the catacombs, and another lets you speak with the ancient necromancers so you can learn necromancy. If you return to Tenebrae at this point though, you find out that Bentic, the librarian you met earlier, was executed for forbidden research, and that Devon was imprisoned. This is actually one of my favorite moments in Pagan. You basically find out that Bentic's forbidden research was from a book detailing the fact that Devon is the true Tempest, with Mordea being the younger half-sibling. Why is this important? Well, aside from being the rightful heir, the oldest child is always the stronger when it comes to wielding Tempest powers. The only way to reach this book is by using a scroll you bought from Mithran earlier. Reading the book gets you captured and sent to the docks to be executed along with Devon, and you get to bear witness to Mordea dying in the most satisfying, poetic fashion. Then Devon jumps off the docks and walks away, vowing to return to Tenebrae and rule it when he's ready. But honestly, if you go back now, he's already there, so yeah, another oversight probably. But the biggest thing about this questline is that I felt like I did some good to Pagan by helping to depose a tyrannical ruler. But unfortunately, not much changes in Tenebrae. I think the guardsmen stopped harassing the townsfolk though, at least I never saw them do it for the rest of the game. The only change now is that Devon walks around the palace instead of at his old house, and the servant girl stays at her place all the time. Back in the day, this is where I usually stopped playing, because to be perfectly honest, I actually got stuck here in the catacombs as a kid. I think I found this area kind of frightening back then, because the solution to reach the next area is very simple. But this is the first real dungeon of the game. I know the game has been criticized for its lack of dungeon variety, but personally that never bothered me. Like David said, you will definitely get lost quite a bit just because the environments are so similar to each other. And the world having that boring gray look all the time makes sense considering that the pagans live near a volcano. Again, it never bothered me or bored me, but I would never say no to more dungeon variety, of course. Before moving on though, I want to talk about the creature designs. I love them. Look at this kith. Look at this thorax. Look at this ghoul. How about this troll? Doesn't this demon look pretty cool? I've always liked the designs of the creatures and monsters in this game. It really gave me a sense that this world is entirely alien and unique from other environments we were in previous Ultima games. One sad thing though is that these monsters don't usually have much on them when you slay them. And a lot of the times, you're just going to be running away from them unless they're in the way or something. Moving on though, this whole ordeal of being a necromancer is pretty crazy. Okay, for one, the necromancers are low in number, according to Vividos, but in order to even be an apprentice, or rather, scion, you have to brave catacombs filled with traps, crumbling floors, ghouls, skeletons, ghosts, then meet a god who could kill you in a wink if he really wanted to. I'm not even kidding, you come across 2 trainee corpses in Lithos' domain who couldn't even reach him. I mean, seriously, Lothian and Vividos did all this? I think Vividos needs to reorganize the test somehow, or at least put the dead to sleep or something. Or get some workers to fix the crumbling floors. Otherwise, he better get used to the lack of new recruits. Towards the end of the questline, it's just me and him as working necromancers. Pretty sure we're gonna need, like, a lot more. Especially since the avatar leaves right after anyways. Once you meet Lithos, you have to finally go back to Vividos and inter Lothian. He gives you a key to do so, the key of the Caretaker, which also unlocks a lot of the doors in the catacombs that open up the rest of the game. One of those doors opens up the birthplace of Morians, which Vividos tasked you with finding in order to complete your pilgrimage. But unfortunately, nothing really happens here. I believe this is one of the things that was cut out of the game. Vividos said he saw a great vision once he found the birthplace of Morians, but when you arrive here, you don't see anything. Also, yeah, someone was born here. Past this though is a very important area where the Avatar meets the 3 Zealand gods, Apethys, Odion, and Amorous. They tell the Avatar that they know who he is, what the Guardian is, and that he has to find the 5 black rock pieces that were scattered across the world when the Guardian destroyed the obelisk. One of them being in the room up ahead with a somewhat obtuse puzzle. The solution here is to use the Dispel Magical Portal Scroll that the Avatar bought from Mithran, the very same scroll the Avatar used to find Bentek's book. While it does say in the scroll that it can dispel magical doors as well, I always thought that these runes on the side were just decorations. It never occurred to me that I could use the scroll to open these doors. Honestly, I wasn't able to finish this game back in the day without a guide. Once you get the Black Rock fragment though, the Zealand Gods tells the Avatar that he has to master the 4 elemental schools of magic, find the other 4 pieces of the obelisk, use them to steal the Titan's powers, and become a Titan himself, the Titan of Ether. So, back when I first played Ultima 7 and 8, I was thinking to myself that how in the hell is the Avatar, despite being a gifted human, is supposed to take down the Guardian, who is basically a god in every sense of the word? Well, when I got to this point back then, I thought to myself, wow, okay, so the Avatar is going to become a Titan then. Then he'll be able to face off against the Guardian in an epic battle and take him down a few pegs. The themes of a hero having to ascend, not out of a selfish need for power, but out of necessity or self-preservation, is one of the things I like about this game. And the Guardian attempting to doom the Avatar into banishment would have been his undoing. And think about it, the Guardian tricked the Zealands into creating the Titans, then the Avatar deposes them, becomes a god, that would eventually go on to defeat the Guardian, like how the pagans destroyed themselves by creating the Titans out of ignorance and fear. Then again, the Guardian doesn't seem bothered as you doing all these tasks in order to escape the planet, so who knows.
Ah, Avatar, the thrill of conquest is so invigorating.
Going back to when you got the key of the Caretaker from Vividos though, you can choose to go in whichever direction you want from the area past the catacombs. The key lets you open these doors now. Usually I go to Carthax Lake where Hydros is imprisoned. Her deal is that a long time ago, she killed the beloved of the Necromancer Kaelin, which made him really mad of course, so he concocted a plan to seal her in a lake using Blackrock. He was probably the only human before the Avatar who could have actually killed Hydros, but she pleaded with him and offered his lover back, and gave him Tempest powers if he would stay his hand. I mentioned earlier that you can't learn Tempest powers as it's hereditary. but she offers you the same deal she gave Kaelin if you would free her. In order to free her, you have to desecrate the grave of Kaelin's beloved, which frees the waters to her shrine. When you go back to her, she basically calls you stupid and leaves, ruining Pagan with floods and storms.
I am now free. Thank you, foolish one, for your actions. Consider my gift of your wretched life as payment for your part. Now I will have my vengeance upon your pathetic kind. While they slay the descendant of my jailer. Let us see who can reach Dedham first, groundling.
And of course, you don't get Tempest powers out of it. You should really get a dunce hat though, but oh well. Freeing her was required anyways, and I wish I waited until towards the end of the game to do this, because setting her free gives you this visual and sound effect every once in a while. So alright, you can't learn Tempestry, but you can learn the rest. The Necromancers have some neat spells like summoning a golem and putting the undead back to their resting place. Sounds useless, but skeletons in this game reform after a while after slaying them. Most of the times it's best to run away from combat, but I found a few occasions of having to use the Grant Peace spell if I wanted to loot a chest nearby or something. Theurgy is one of my favorites, with the Restoration Healing spell being my most used, and another spell that lets you hear the truth from people. I love using this on Orlok, the bartender back in Tenebrae. He has a compulsion to tell you tall tales, and using this spell shows that he's basically full of crap most of the time. The Error's Servant spell is pretty neat and lets you obtain items from faraway places, or to flick levers and switches. But the best thing about these spells is that all you need are the crafted enchanted focuses, and the only limits to casting them is how much mana you have. Next is Sorcery, by far my favorite out of all the magical schools. I don't usually enjoy playing mage characters in video games. I've always loved fighters and rogues or a combination of the two. The only time I like playing a mage is if I could be a fighter as well, but anyways. First, I have to talk about how the Avatar becomes a disciple for the Sorcerers. We find out that all the Acolyte slots are filled, with Acolytes being very important members of the Cabal when it comes to summoning Pyros, the Titan of Fire. Going back a little further, after the Guardian conquered Pagan, Pyros is being a jerk like the other Titans and was causing the volcano nearby to wreck the land with lava and fireballs. 5 Theurgists all got together and tried to bind him using the Tongue of Flame, one of the Blackrock items the Avatar has to find, and they ended up becoming the first Sorcerers, split apart into a Master Sorcerer, a First Acolyte, and 3 Acolytes. So in order to enter the Cabal, the Avatar has to do another dirty deed. The Avatar finds out here that Bane thinks Vardian, the First Acolyte, is plotting to kill the Master Sorcerer, and Vardian says much the same thing. You can choose to assist either, and whatever happens, the other sorcerer summons a demon, and...
I do so enjoy the cries of torment.
Yeah, on top of assisting in a ritualistic murder, stealing, grave desecration, the Avatar helped out in an assassination. What a shame. But it's necessary, as now we can learn sorcery magic. And this is one of the most involved and time-consuming process out of all the magical schools. Basically, spells are cast through the use of focuses, much like Theurgy, and each focus is good for certain spells, with a limited amount of charges depending on the focus. The disc focus is normally good for multiple charges of ignite and extinguishing of candles, but only holds one charge for everything else, for example. You enchant a focus by placing it in the center of a pentagram, and arrange reagents and candles depending on the position of the star. I helped Bane for this playthrough, so she directs you to the library where you learn about all this stuff. Back then, I really felt like a proper sorcerer after pouring through the many books in the library. If you don't want to use a guide for this portion, then I highly recommend taking notes. I honestly find this whole process very rewarding, and putting everything you learn into practice back at the pentagram has a satisfying feel to it. To this day, I haven't seen a process this involved when it comes to magic in any video game. I know many people don't like this system, and I heard that before the patch the placement of candles and reagents was very precise, but I never had a problem with it. The few times I couldn't get the spell to work was because I misread the reagent or used the wrong focus. You get some really cool spells such as teleportation, much like the town sorcerer Baron uses, a magical spell that lets you walk on the brown portions of lava, and summoning and banishing demons. Yeah, we're summoning demons now. And then again, we had a magical Blackrock sword with an entrapped demon inside it, so we got some experience with this stuff at least. After this, you're sent off to the Obsidian Fortress in order to become an Acolyte. The Avatar has to put what he learned to practice through 4 trials by using various spells in order to obtain 4 blue discs. And I'm bringing this part up because you remember the demon back at the Forge of Virtue? The one the Avatar binded to the Blackrock sword? Well, he's here, or at least he has the same name as him. He doesn't recognize you though for some reason, so it's likely we met him before Earthian binded him to the mirror, or his mind was wiped or something. But he's basically your first test in not attacking everything you see that looks dangerous. He makes mention that the ones who fail are the ones you see before you. Well, actually, second test. The first one involves defeating 2 demons the Master Sorcerer summoned. And the design here is definitely lacking because you could just run past them. The demon even mentions that as a possible outcome. Honestly, developers should have put up a barrier before the stairs in order for the avatar to defeat the demon somehow. Another thing they didn't get to, I guess. For those of you who played Serpent Isle, right before encountering Battling at the Wall of Lights, his cronies get turned into Cyclopses by the sorceress Selena, and magical barriers block your progression. So basically you have a fight you can't just run from, and the whole setup fits narrative of Battlin's henchmen buying time so he can open the Wall of Lights and become a god, somehow. Or maybe it's intentional, like maybe running away from flesh-eating demons is a viable strategy, being a sorcerer and all. Sorcerers tend to be physically weak, devoting themselves to the dark arts and such, so who knows. I just know that if I'm facing off against a demon, I'm going the other direction unless I have some way of dealing with them. After passing your test though, Malcheer, the Master Sorcerer, gives you your final lesson. Enchant focuses the remaining spells you have learned, cast them on him, and banish the demon he summons. Then, you're off to summon the devil. Excuse me, I mean Pyros. I haven't mentioned this earlier, but Malcheer gets fairly pissed that Bane or Vardian killed the other sorcerer because he was looking to summon Pyros in a ritual called the Ritual of Flame so he could find out about the sun, which most pagans don't really know about, I believe. You can actually fail this section too. The summoning goes off without a hitch if you do it perfectly, but if you mess up a step, then the acolyte you assisted earlier dies, and Malcheer throws a fireball in your face for being an idiot. But if you fail 2 steps... and mouthing off to Malcheer during the ritual just makes him attack you. Aside from these schools of magic, Mithran also teaches you thaumaturgy. I never really messed with them in this playthrough. In fact, I don't even think they're required at all. I actually missed the second to final spell because I think I progressed a bit too far in the main story, but his last book is required because it's necessary to reach the final area of the game. But once you've mastered all the schools, you have to find the remaining Blackrock items. Malcheer has it on his person, so naturally we have to go kill him in order to get it. Because apparently stepping in his domain without being summoned means death for the acolyte who enters. That is supposedly the rules here, but hold on, I don't think anyone told me that. But whatever, you kill him and you get the Tongue of Flame, which is necessary to steal Pyros' powers later on. Devin has the Tear of Seas, and this is one of the biggest pieces cut out of the game. First off, the Avatar goes to him and tells him he needs the Tear of Seas, and naturally Devin has no idea what the heck he's talking about. But he basically gives you a key and you loot it from a chest in the palace. Originally, the Avatar was supposed to go to an underground city filled with Hydros' minions in order to find the artifact. Instead, Devin just gives it to you. In fact, he said he fished it out of the sea, which sounds unlikely. Stratos has hers close by, and Lithos' fragment is in the Pit of the Dead underneath the grave, which is pretty fitting. At this point, if you haven't freed Hydros yet, you have to go do that before entering the final area. Then you have to enter the big summoning circle with the Tongue of Flame in order to free Pyros. And doing so causes this to happen every once in a while. Pyros is pretty pissed off, understandably. I imagine I'd be pretty mad too at being imprisoned for a couple hundred years or so. We're approaching the endgame now, but the last spellbook Mithran gives you grants access to the Ethereal Void where the Titans dwell. No reagents required other than the 5 Blackrock items. There is not much to say other than the Avatar has to enter the respective domains of each Titan, drain their powers with the Blackrock items, arrange them around the circle, absorb their powers in order to become the Titan of Ether, so he can create his own Black Gate and finally return home to Britannia. But alas, it's too late. Britannia has been conquered. But man, what an ending! Say what you will about Pagan, but this ending had me extremely excited for Ultima IX. The idea that the Avatar had to surpass his mortal limitations in order to reach an equal footing with the Guardian was one of the things I was looking forward to in the final game. I know Pagan is vastly hated by most Ultima fans, many areas unfinished, plotlines were cut out, many people didn't like the controls, the jumping, but to be honest, I never had a problem with the controls or the jumping. I know that the platforming before the patch was absolutely awful, but the patched version I've been playing all these years, I just never had a problem with. It's not the best jumping ever or anything like that, but I'd rather deal with the jumping in this game than in Underworld 1 and 2. You still have to save before jumping though, because you might not be properly aligned for a jump, but other than that, again, I had no issues with the jumping. And to mention the controls briefly, again, I just don't have a problem with them. The Avatar moves where I want him to move and climbs where I want him to climb. I promise I looked at all of this objectively while I was playing, but I was just not feeling the frustration at all when it came to the mechanics of this game. And once again, they're not 10 out of 10 controls, but I didn't feel like I was fighting to move the Avatar around. One of the things I like is how you control the Avatar. To be more accurate, the animation work that went into his directional movements, whether he's turning, walking, climbing, running, and whatnot. The way he casts spells and uses magical scrolls always looks so cool to me too. I'd have to say the one thing I really disliked about Pagan is honestly how unfinished the game is. I would have loved to see how the full story turned out, as well as the unreleased expansion. There are these huge double doors in the cave on the plateau, and as a kid, I spent a fair amount of time trying to find a key up and down the cave, or on the plateau, but I found out way too late that these doors basically had nothing behind it, and was originally meant to be the entrance to the expansion area, the Lost Vale. I was considering talking about the expansion in this video, but I'm thinking it'll be its own video in the future. Hope I don't regret that. I feel like there'd be a lot to talk about. But my opinion is that, even if Ultima VIII was a finished game, I don't think most Ultima fans would have liked it anyway, not as a numbered entry. I feel like if it was more of a side story like an Underworld game, it would have been better received. I know they couldn't do that because it followed Serpent Isle, and considering that Ultima VII set such a high bar, I'm not sure Ultima VIII would have delivered. When it comes down to it, the main things I love about Pagan are its world, the story, well, what we got at least, the dark atmosphere, and the music. The music is one of the best in the series. You get a sense from its notes that Pagan was probably once a great planet to live on, much like Britannia, which of course always had its problems. No world is perfect. But with Pagan, the music really hammers home just how hopeless and defeated the planet is, with only very brief moments where you can get a glimpse of his former glory. So all this bad stuff the Avatar did, the ritualistic sacrifice, assisting in an assassination, thievery, desecrating graves, considering the world the Avatar finds himself in, if you act like the typical good guy, well, you need to look no further than what happened to Tor in the beginning. He basically has to survive, keep his head down, and throw himself in with the Titan's brutal ways in order to return home. Not very virtuous, I know, which is the whole theme of Pagan. While he did do some good, such as the deposing of Lady Mordea, and on occasion you can give coins to beggars if you so choose, he did very nearly destroy the planet on his way back home. I know I read a lot about how the Avatar basically doomed the planet when he defeated the Titans, but I'm not sure I agree with that. If anything, the Pagans would have been free of the Titans' rule and would be able to live their own lives on their own terms now. Heck, even Mithran said towards the end of the game that if he defeated the Titans, he'd have the worship and admiration of all pagans. Anyways, I just want to finish this off by saying that even though Pagan is unfinished, I still think it's a fun game. Even a good game. And while I don't replay it nearly as much as I do 7, I do see myself coming back to it again in the future.